is AMs with Annette, your UK business update. So thank you for tuning in with me today, weekdays at 11 a.m. Although I am considering dropping the Friday session. So do let me know how you feel about that. I am considering just doing it Monday to Thursday. So something that I'm probably going to start playing with a little bit as well. But thank you for tuning in. I do very much appreciate it. As I say, whichever platform you are on, it is always great to see you. So if you are tuning in, do give me a hello in the comments. Let me know that you are here. If you're watching on the replay, do give me a hashtag replay in the comments as well. I would love to come back and say hello to you too. So what I want to cover off first is IKEA are in talks with the government over returning furlough money. In all 9 countries that it has received furlough support, it is saying that it suffered less than expected. Therefore, it wants to return the furlough money given. So IKEA said it expected business to drop by about 70 to 80%. But now it has reopened, it has seen a large amount of pent-up demand. And it said that it's just the right thing to do to return the furlough money since it has seen this increase in demand. So very interesting move there by IKEA. Of course, we've had a number of people criticize some other businesses for claiming their furlough money that they are, of course, entitled to. But we have heard a number of people saying, you know, if you're owned by a wealthy business owner, by a wealthy CEO, should the businesses be allowed to claim furlough? Of course, it's important to remember that the whole point of furlough is to protect jobs, and therefore the finances of the individual business owner and those of the business can be very, very different. And it's important to remember they're separate legal entities. But that talk of IKEA returning the furlough money comes as we hear that the Chancellor is to give HMRC powers to reclaim hundreds of millions of COVID-19 support payments. So it's going to be worrying for a number of people. They are saying that businesses and individuals that HMRC believes either did not deserve bailouts or broke rules on their use will face 100% tax and could face criminal prosecution if they do not pay. They're saying this includes false claims of furlough and business grant payments. So we have, of course, spoken before about furlough fraud and how that is a big, big issue. There are worries about the volume of furlough fraud that is happening at the moment. And of course, then in terms of the grant payments, we are speaking primarily about, oh, I might drop my coaster for my tea there. We're speaking primarily about the self-employed grant scheme as well. So they're saying once legislation is enforced, businesses will have 30 days to declare their mistaken application and pay back without penalty. But after that, if it is discovered during a review or an audit, then there will be 100% tax applied to the claims as well. So businesses may have to watch for that. You know, we have spoken already about people claiming, as I say, things like furlough fraud, claiming the grants that they were potentially not entitled to. We see all over social media people saying things like they got the government bonus and they're able to still work whilst they're self-employed. We've heard a lot of these types of stories. We've heard a lot of stories from people who are employees who are being told, I know that my employer is claiming me as furlough and they're making me work. We've heard all those stories. So the government is really keen to clamp down on this. Of course, they said this a number of months ago when these schemes were first introduced. The head of HMRC came out and said that any attempt to claim this money fraudulently, they would lead to criminal prosecution. So this is not a new thing, and it has been spoken about for months, but this is it coming into the finance bill. It's coming into law. So something to keep our eyes on there with that when it comes to actually what the numbers of claims are going to be, the numbers of are going to be when it comes to getting back that money that's been claimed fraudulently as well. So thank you everyone who's tuning in. Thank you Orlando. Thank you Joe. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Mariam. Thank you, Faris. Thank you, Rafe. Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you, Leanne. Whichever platform you are tuning in today, I do very, very much appreciate it. So thank you for joining me. Do give me a hello in the comments. Let me know that you are here. I would love to know that you are here today. So do let me know if you are tuning in. This is AMs with Annette, weekdays at 11 a.m. This is a UK business update that I provide weekdays at 11 a.m. covering all things around the government, coronavirus, banks, the economy, the Brexit situation as well when it affects the economy too. That is all things that we are covering at the moment in AMs with Annette. So thank you very much for tuning in today. I do appreciate it. Economists are warning that a post-lockdown upturn may not return GDP to pre-COVID-19 levels, and it will in fact take years. We've been hearing very similar things in reality for at least a few weeks now, if not a few months. Economists feeling worse and worse about the outlook for the future. We're hearing that falls in unemployment and investment, accompanied by a persistent rise in savings by households, means the economy is likely to remain a shadow of its former self for some time. Of course, as we increase unemployment and we put less into capital projects for investment, that all has a negative effect on the long-term outlook for the country and an effect on the GDP as well. Of course, we have also coupling that with a potential drop out of the EU without tariffs and things having been put in place, and that in itself would have created an issue with GDP and a drop in GDP anyway. So when we couple that with a plummet in GDP as a result of coronavirus, it does not put the UK in a nice position at all. I'm going to take a drink of my tea. If you have any questions on anything that I am sharing today, please do make sure that you ask me in the comments. I am more than happy to answer those. So please do let me know if you do have any questions. Like I say, I will happily answer any of those questions that you may have. So thank you for everyone who is tuning in. Thank you for those of you who are joining me. This is AMs with Annette, 11 AMs weekdays, and it is your UK business update. More than a third of small businesses that closed during the pandemic have already reopened ahead of the return of non-essential retail in England on the 15th of June, which of course is today as we are recording this. About a quarter of SMEs had halted trading by the end of April, but data shows that many have reopened since the end of April. And as I say, more than a third that had closed are already reopened now. That was ahead of the retail opening today. We, of course, await the statistics on that to see how much retail has reopened. Hopefully they will start publishing some data on that quite soon in terms of footfall and in terms of spending for the today and this whole week, the first week of non-essential retail in England opening. Of course, not the case in Scotland or Wales as yet. But in England, non-essential retail opening. Of course, in Northern Ireland, non-essential retail opened on Friday, which was, if you are watching this on any replay, that was the 12th, that non-essential retail, 12th of June, that non-essential retail opened in Northern Ireland. And as the English non-essential retail reopens, it will, of course, provide them with some revenue, which perhaps they maybe have had none so far if you're a small retailer with no online presence, or even some of the large retailers with no online presence, then at least some revenue should start flowing as well. The question, of course, is will any of that go to landlords? Small businesses and retail premises have increasing costs at the moment, reduced footfall, and therefore are going to have to use wisely as to where that money goes. Things like PPE and signage are going to be massively important with retail reopening, but potentially you now have obsolete stock because we are 3 months on from the lockdown time period. We've moved to season and all those things. We can have issues with stock being obsolete too, as well as reduced footfall, having less people in a shop at any point in time, queues outside, all those kinds of things. And of course, landlords wanting paid. So that is a big issue. There is currently huge volumes of unpaid commercial property rent. And the big question as well is that businesses who've been unable to pay their rent over this time period, will they ever be able to catch up with the arrears if the landlords don't move on that? Because most businesses could not have afforded a rent increase before this. Particularly retailers, we've heard a lot about the decline of the high street over recent years. And so many retailers were already on a bit of a knife edge coming into this situation, and therefore would not have been able to afford a hike in rent. But if you are having to now pay off rent arrears, to all intents and purposes, you are going to have a hike in rent for potentially the same level of revenue or less revenue with decreased footfall and increased costs, so less profit as well. So this is going to be a big issue, and I think one that's going to linger on for retailers, and we are going to see more and more still closing because they won't be able to catch up on these arrears that they have built up during this period where they have been closed because they just didn't have the profit margin to deal with it before. Therefore, they're not going to have the profit margin to deal with it afterwards unless they have made big changes to their business model and how they operate their business and their profit margins, all those things. So unless those have happened during this close time, unless the retailers have used the time to actually think strategically and work out what needs to be done in order to get them out the hole that they are now in, we're going to see more and more go under, unfortunately. Not a very nice situation, but that is unfortunately where we are. Thank you everyone who is tuning in. I do very much appreciate it. This is your UK business update, AMs with Annette, 11 AMs UK on pretty much all platforms. So we are currently live on Periscope, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. I think I've got them all, and also within the Uncover Wealth community, my private community on Facebook. If you are a business owner and you're not a member of the Uncover Wealth community, I invite you to join us there. You just need to go to Facebook and type Uncover Wealth community into the search bar and you will find us that way. Do come in and join me. I have exclusive trainings in there as well that I don't share anywhere else. So whichever platform you are on, thank you so much for tuning in today. I very much appreciate it. So we are also read a report speaking about mass unemployment today. Of course, we've heard over the last few weeks about the issues with unemployment rising in the UK and the types of levels that may expect to get up to 5 million, 6 million, typical numbers that are being put around. Some are saying that they're going to be much higher as well. So we need to be very aware of what that actually means for us, not just economically, but as a country as well. There was a study done in Austria, and it's famous for showing the psychological impact of long-term unemployment. And in the study, it found things like people borrow fewer library books, they ditch political party membership, their hearts are just not in it. The number of walks that people go on decreases, and they typically walk much slower. The truth is that people find meaning in working, and therefore as we have higher rates of unemployment, what impact is this going to have on our society as a whole and not just the economic aspects? It's very troubling in terms of those numbers that we are hearing. The Treasury Committee has urged help for those who have fallen through the cracks in terms of financial support at the moment as a result of not being able to work, particularly in the hospitality and freelance sectors. The Treasury says this number of people who've fallen through the cracks amounts to around 1 million. This number seems to be massively disputed. Some people are shouting about 3 million, some people are saying 2 million, and the Treasurer is saying 1 million. Of course, we don't actually know where this lies because people who are saying that they have not had any support, were they in a different position? Would they have been entitled to it? Have they had loss of income, etc., etc.? So the answer to some is yes, and the answer to some is no. So this number is heavily disputed, but to all intents and purposes, there are people who have fallen through the cracks in support. Of course, the Chancellor has been very clear that they cannot save every single individual and every single business, and that, that they need to focus on the majority. And although that is horrendous for those people that have fallen through the cracks, that is how things work in general, is that we do need to support the average person, in inverted commas. We do need to support the masses as much as possible, and there will always be people at the extremes that fall out with things. And yes, it feels terribly unfair, and yes, it feels terribly unjust, and yes, it puts some people in a horrendous position, but that is the unfortunate situation of what we're in. These support systems had to be put in place incredibly quickly, and money has to be given out very quickly. And unfortunately, some people have missed out as a result. Manufacturers are calling for coronavirus business rates holidays, similar to the ones granted for shops, bars, and hotels. I also think actually other sectors should be entitled to this as well. So, for example, the events industry. The events industry is unable to operate. People can't be having events, and many events companies have got warehousing and that kind of thing for their supplies, and they are still being charged business rates. And that is very, very difficult because they cannot generate revenue from their traditional revenue lines at the moment. However, what I want to feed in here as well, whilst I'm speaking about this, is we've seen a number of businesses pivot and tweak so that they deliver revenue, or they generate revenue in a different way than they would traditionally. So we see a number of areas where actually perhaps you weren't able to generate revenue during this time, but they've actually gone out and changed what they do so they can. Okay, we've also seen a number of business owners just not do that and sit and wait for financial support. And it's always, as a business, going to be much more positive if you take things into your own hands and you define your own destiny, regardless of what gets thrown at you. And that is a business owner. That is an entrepreneur. That's what they do. And therefore, actually controlling what you can control and doing what you can do to generate revenue at this time is going to be way more important than, kind of sitting back and worrying about the fact that you may have fallen through the cracks. Taking things into your own hands and doing what you can do to generate revenue for your own business, whatever that might look like. And it might be very different from what you want it to be at this point in time. But doing that is going to be much better for yourself and your family in the long run than any support that you may have missed out on at this point in time. So, that's how I feel about the situation. So I appreciate everyone who is tuning in. I appreciate the thumbs up, the likes, the hearts, the shares. I can see them coming in on whichever platform you are watching. So I do very much appreciate that. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you for doing all those lovely things, for all those shares, those likes, those thumbs up, those hearts, all those things. So thank you so much for that. This is AM to the Net, weekdays at 11 a.m. So I am back again tomorrow at 11 a.m. I would love to see you here for another session. In the meantime, like I said, you are invited to come and join the Uncover Wealth community, my private community on Facebook for business owners and entrepreneurs. So come over to Facebook and type Uncover Wealth Community into the search bar and join the group there as well. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I know your time is incredibly precious, and I appreciate you spending some of it with me. And I will see you all again